Chris Watts appeared to be the perfect family man. A father of 2 young daughters and a loving husband, he lived with his wife, Shanann, and their children in a picturesque home in Frederick, Colorado. From the outside, they seemed like an ordinary, happy family. Chris worked as an operator at an oil and gas company, and Shanann was a thriving entrepreneur. Their social media profiles were filled with images of love, laughter, and family gatherings. But behind closed doors, a much darker story was unfolding, one that would lead to a shocking crime and leave a nation stunned. In the early hours of August 13th, 2018, Shanann Watts, who was 15 weeks pregnant with the couple's 3rd child, returned home from a business trip. She was last seen alive by her friend, Nicole Atkinson, who had dropped her off at around 2 a.m. The next day, Shanann missed an important doctor's appointment and failed to respond to calls and messages, which was highly unusual for her. Concerned, Nicole went to the Watts' home, but found no sign of Shanann or her daughters, Bella, aged 4, and Celeste, aged 3. Panicked, Nicole called Chris, who was at work, to ask where his wife and children were. Chris claimed he had no idea, stating that Shanann had taken the girls on a play date earlier that morning. Nicole immediately contacted the Frederick Police Department, who arrived at the house shortly after. Chris joined them, seemingly worried, as they conducted a welfare check. Inside the house, they found Shanann's car in the garage, her purse and phone left behind, and her medication for lupus untouched, all clear signs that she had not left voluntarily. As the search for Shanann and the girls intensified, Chris made public pleas on television for their safe return. His voice steady, but his eyes betraying a nervousness that did not go unnoticed. "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back," he pleaded, his hands fidgeting. The plea seemed off to many, including investigators who were already growing suspicious of his behavior.
Do your kids have like a favorite pair of shoes that they normally wear?
Favorite pair of shoes?
Yeah.
No, they have all their shoes are in the closet right here.
Do you know which ones they normally wear? Like,
it's like a flavor of the month thing, honestly. Like, it's whatever they want to wear. I say pick your shoes and they just go through them. Bella's on this side, Cece's on that side.
sure.
Your kids take any medication? Cece takes Singulair and Omeprazole.
How often?
Singulair is every night for allergies, and Omeprazole for the
Over the next few days, Chris was interviewed multiple times by police. His story remained inconsistent, and his demeanor seemed strangely calm, even detached. Investigators soon learned that Chris had been having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, who was unaware that Chris was still married. She came forward after seeing the news about Shanann's disappearance, shocked and horrified that the man she was seeing could be involved in such a case. On August 15th, 2 days after Shanann and the girls were reported missing, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. The results were damning. He failed. Cornered by the evidence and pressure from the investigators, Chris finally broke down. He confessed to his father, Ronnie, in a private interview room that he had hurt Shanann, but refused to reveal the full extent of his actions. The detectives then pressed him further, and in a moment of desperation, Chris concocted a new story. He claimed that he had witnessed Shanann strangling their daughters after an argument, and in a fit of rage, he had killed her in retaliation. However, this story did not hold up. Investigators knew there was more to the story, and they pressed Chris until he eventually confessed to the horrifying truth. He had murdered his entire family. Chris admitted that in the early hours of August 13th, he strangled Shanann in their bed, then loaded her body, along with his 2 daughters, into the back of his truck. He drove to an oil field owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum, where he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. He then proceeded to smother Bella and Celeste, one by one, and disposed of their bodies in oil tanks nearby. The cold and calculated nature of the crime stunned investigators and the public alike. Chris showed little emotion as he described the events, and his lack of remorse was chilling. The autopsies confirmed that both Bella and Celeste had been smothered and Shanann had been strangled. Bella's autopsy also revealed that she had fought back against her father in her final moments, biting her tongue in an attempt to survive. The motive behind the murders quickly became clear. Chris had been planning to start a new life with Nicole Kessinger, free from the responsibilities of his marriage and impending fatherhood. Financial troubles were also looming over the Watts family, and Chris believed that eliminating his family would provide him with a fresh start. However, his actions were far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Chris Watts was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with a deceased human body. On November 6, 2018, he pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. During the sentencing hearing, the judge described his actions as perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have ever handled.
I've been a judicial officer now for starting my 17th year, and I could objectively say that this is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen. And nothing less than a maximum sentence would be appropriate, and anything less than the maximum sentence would depreciate the seriousness of this offense. So the court is going to sentence Mr. Watts as follows. With regard to count number 1, murder in the first degree as it relates to Shanann Watts, the court is going to sentence you, sir, to a life sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections, followed with no possibility of parole. And that is going to run consecutively to all but counts 3 and 4. With regard to count 2, as it relates to murder in the first degree with Bella, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole. With regard to count number 3, the court is going to sentence you as it relates to Celeste to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole. With regard to counts 4 and 5 relating to Bella and Celeste as a different theory of first-degree murder, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections, and legally those sentences must run concurrently as a different theory of first-degree murder.
Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The case of Chris Watts remains a chilling example of how a seemingly perfect life can hide unimaginable darkness. It serves as a stark reminder that evil can sometimes wear a familiar face, and that betrayal can come from those closest to us. The tragic deaths of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and their unborn son, Nico, continue to haunt those who knew them and serve as a heartbreaking chapter in the annals of true crime.